So when the name started getting floated out yesterday, which was what is today, Friday, so Thursday, more and more throughout the day, I started. My initial reaction was one of okay, like that's obviously I remember Bill O'Brien from his time at Penn State, his 2 seasons there. I remember him with the Texans. I believe one of the times he made the playoffs there, they played the Bengals. I remember watching that game. Obviously, had success coaching there. I knew he was at Alabama, but I didn't know a ton, and so it was like, okay, this is an interesting hire. And as the news broke, and I dove more into it, and I wrote something for this morning, I really think that this makes a lot of sense for what Ohio State needed. Now, is he the perfect offensive coordinator? No, probably not. There are certainly reasons that there could be some concerns, and I don't think anyone would tell you that this is a surefire, Buckeyes offense is going to be elite, though it never seems to be that bad when Ryan Day's involved. But what Ryan Day was looking for was an experienced guy who could come into a room on the offensive side of the ball that is relatively inexperienced with Brian Hartline and Justin Fry. Tony Alford had been the most senior guy in that room. Even Ryan Day himself hasn't been doing this all that long in comparison to a guy like a Bill O'Brien, who's been coaching offensive players for more than 30 years. So as I kind of dug into it, he checks a lot of boxes, I guess is what I'd say. He can come in. He's going to run Ryan Day's offense. This isn't what you saw at Alabama, where he's working for a defensive coach and maybe installing a lot of his own ideas. I don't know that to be the case. I just assume that with Nick Saban. But he's going to come in and run Ryan Day's offense, which we know works. We've seen it. He can tweak things, I imagine, just like all of the coaches have their input. And most importantly, he will allow Ryan Day to go be the CEO, so to speak, of this team instead of the head coach and offensive coordinator, also helping with the quarterbacks, dealing with recruiting, dealing with transfer portal, dealing with, there's just too many hats a head coach has to wear these days that it's sustainable for him to do all of those things. So this takes a big load off of Ryan Day's plate. And it's a guy that he trusts, which has been the problem. This has been something we talked about it a year ago. I remember Mark talking about, will Ryan Day give up play calling? And the question I had was, well, who are you going to give it to? Kevin Wilson was out the door to be the head coach at Tulsa. The next guy was Brian Hartline, who got promoted to offensive coordinator, but he's only been doing this a handful of years as a wide receivers coach and never called plays before in his career. There just wasn't an option to do, especially in a year where you're starting a new quarterback for the first time. You have a new offensive line. It just didn't make sense last year. And there wasn't an obvious guy on the staff still. So I think this makes a lot of sense. Will it be a great success? I mean, I think you look at what Bill O'Brien's done. You put in everything he's got at Ohio State. If they can get that offensive line cranked up, maybe add another player from the transfer portal or develop a guy that can step in and play tackle, I think you're pretty good. Will Howard, does that work out the way you hope? There's still some questions here, but I think from what they were looking for, a guy who was experienced doing this job can come in and run Ryan Day's offense. I think Bill O'Brien will be that guy.
Yeah, you touch on the layer that's just rare to a certain extent, is to find a guy that has shown capable of, regardless of any criticism that anyone has, to pull out a win-loss record or anything like that. He was successful with the Houston Texans. He ran the football operation there, was heavily involved in personnel, but ran the offense there as an NFL head coach. Did the same thing at Penn State, considering the circumstances there. Successful most recently at New England. So just, that wealth of experience at the very highest levels in doing this, because a lot of people will run to the win-loss record and then maybe take an even deeper dive to, okay, where did his offenses rank in the Big Ten, in the NFL, nationally, and tie that to success or a prediction of success and maybe not necessarily be wowed by what his offensive ranks are, but considering what he's going to be given in terms of talent, and then this other layer that you're talking about, it seems like a really good hire.
Yes, and as we are discussing this, Ohio State officially announces the hire, so we don't have to speculate anymore. It is done. He will be. I'm just going to read from the press release here. Ryan Day announces Friday that Bill O'Brien has been hired as Ohio State's offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. I'm going to skip the quote from Ryan Day, which says basically what you just said about Bill O'Brien. Brian Hartline will be co-offensive coordinator in addition to continuing his capacity as one of the nation's premier wide receivers coaches. It is anticipated that Corey Dennis, quarterbacks coach the past 4 seasons, will transition into a still to be determined role within the program. So there we have it. Getting back to what you said there, look, I think if you just look at Penn State and the numbers, you're not considering the fact that he obviously, was taking over a program that was in the, beginnings of a rebuild after the Jerry Sandusky scandal. If you look at Alabama, he's stepping in for a guy in Steve Sarkisian, who had a ton of success kind of rebuilding his career at Alabama under Nick Saban as part of Nick Saban's, whatever you want to call it, rehab for coaches that have been let go. The success at Alabama was certainly there. They won a Heisman, or they had a quarterback who won a Heisman Trophy. They went to a national championship game, won an SEC championship. The offense was scoring over 40 points a game. It was one of the tops in the country. It just wasn't quite at the level of the couple of years prior. And look, I think I saw a lot of Alabama fans quickly pile on Ohio State fans. I went over to the message board, the Alabama message board on 24/7 Sports, and was reading through some of that, and talking about how Ohio State fans laughed at Alabama fans when he was hired, and now they're praising this hire. And look, I think fans are going to be fans, right? And you see this. He's not a splashy name. He's not a sexy name. So other fans are going to kind of laugh at it. There's a perception that he's been fired at a number of places. He really hasn't been fired from many places. He's moved around a lot, but that's often because he's taken new jobs, whether that be to go back to the NFL or come back to college. And I think that Alabama fans, they reacted very similarly to losing games as Ohio State fans have losing games. Ohio State fans have wanted Jim Knowles fired at points of this season when they had arguably the best defense in the country. They've wanted Ryan Day fired. It's the emotional part of it. And so just because you may be hearing or reading Alabama fans on social media saying how terrible he was at Alabama, I'm not sure. I think you need to look at kind of the numbers and see that, and especially considering, like I said, what they want out of this situation. It's not Bill O'Brien coming in and creating his own offense. It's Bill O'Brien helping Ryan Day. And another thing I forgot to mention before is, even if Bill O'Brien is only at Ohio State for 2 years, say, which has been the case at some of his previous stops, he can be a mentor to Brian Hartline on a more intimate level because he doesn't have all the responsibilities that Ryan Day. So then you may be grooming even more so Brian Hartline for 2, 3, however many years down the road to then step in and be the next guy and be maybe the long-term solution as the offensive coordinator and play caller. I won't go as far to say head coach. I know that's been thrown around as he's the possible successor to Ryan Day, but I'm not pushing Ryan Day out the door that quickly. So again, I think if you really look at it, and like I said before, my first reaction was just kind of ho-hum, but when you sort of dive into it, there's a lot of things to like about this.
Pat Murphy's here from 247 Sports, bucknuts.com. Get on over there, especially with the Bill O'Brien hire. Check out Pat's work and his analysis of this particular hire and so much going on right now with Ohio State football. Please like the video and subscribe here at the Voice of College Football as well. We got a Buckeye show that we do every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern time as well. Join the live stream. Ross B. York, because you covered the Brian Hartline follow-up I was about to ask, so I think we're good there. Ross B. York
real quick,
Yep.
I think we should talk about Brian Hartline for a second, because now we know what actually his role is going to be. Like, it was very unclear last season where the chain of command was coming from, right? Like, I mean, we're pretty sure that Ryan Day was almost exclusively calling plays for Ohio State's offense, but we kept getting told, like, you know, Brian Hartline's in the mix. He had headset on, which is not uncommon, obviously, but it just wasn't kind of clear how the delineation was. He was the offensive coordinator, but what was he really doing beyond coaching wide receivers? And I do believe that Brian Hartline, you know, it wasn't just a title. He did have more responsibilities last year. When we talked to him, he was very aware of what was going on in the offensive line room and with the quarterbacks, though he did often defer to Ryan and Corey on that because they are obviously specialists in that department. But certainly Brian Hartline took on more, but how much more was never really clear. So now you've got a guy coming in who it will be very clear where this is all going. And that's not just from a media perspective, from a fan perspective, but I think that also helps the players. You know that this offensive coordinator is the offensive coordinator. Now, Brian Hartline will still have that co-offensive coordinator title. He will be in those conversations in the meeting rooms, all that stuff still. But I think it does help kind of draw the lines of where things stand within the offensive side of that program. Whereas last year, maybe it was a little bit less clear.